Good morning, good morning. It is the morning after the first day of Microsoft Ignite. We now have things like the book of news published, so we can go and see all of the things they're going to tell us throughout the course of Ignite and kind of see what it means for us. I am once again looking incredibly tired because I stayed up to keep an eye on the initial keynotes, the announcements, the data and AI sections, so I can give you the best news. So bear with me, I'll be drinking coffee, we'll be all right. So moving on, what's interesting, what's new? So the main flagship thing people spoke about is Microsoft Mesh. And honestly, I had not heard of it before. This is kind of a new thing for me. And it's a mixed reality platform. And everyone kind of watched it going, oh okay, yeah, it's cool. It doesn't really mean anything to me though. And that's the real hard thing, right? So this idea that we can buy a very expensive augmented reality helmet, and we can use that to do our conference calls. We had this whole Teams style video call where people had their avatars there and they were collaborating in a 3D space. And you watch it going, never going to use it. And that actually, I have to kind of rein myself back from that way of thinking. Because actually, yeah, currently it's very much early adopter. It's very much in that it's expensive to use. It has some fairly niche use cases. The software isn't absolutely everywhere. But the big thing about Microsoft Mesh is that they're actually making a platform for collaboration and development. It's like the step change, on the maturity curve. When we're in the early adopter phase, not that many people are using it. It's too expensive to actually use on a day-to-day basis. People aren't going to say, I'm going to replace all my Teams calls and I'm going to get every person in my company a HoloLens, because that's an expensive, very expensive way of working. But what this does mean is it starts to move us up that maturity curve as the development community grows, as more people are able to actually start working on it, more apps and integrations and things become available. The hardware actually goes through several iterations and moves from the early prototype style phases into the next generation, into the third generation of community or enabled hardware. So if this is just a step towards going, in 3 years, 5 years, there might actually be a fairly affordable way, like having a little webcom thing sitting on your desk. You can actually just pop on something that's fairly priced and a lot of people can use the software and it's integrated into most things. That is amazing news, because actually there's a ton of really, really cool stuff we could do from it. So I had to, give myself a slap on the wrist and go, it's a real important step in the right direction. But it kind of sets a bit of a theme. So throughout the rest of Ignite, I was watching it going, where are the big data announcements? Where are the big data announcements? And there wasn't too much, actually, if you're on the data side of the fence. So we'll have a step through what those announcements actually are. But yeah, I guess setting expectations, Microsoft Mesh was definitely the big headlight that we saw a few things from. And everything else, there's a few nice releases, there's a few nice things. Not to belittle those guys, there are some major milestones for some of the products. But for me, certainly, there isn't that much. So let's have a bit of a look. Okay, always a reminder, they've been really, really good recently with Microsoft conferences in that they will publish this book of news. So I'll pop a link down below, but you can go and see this book of news, which has, here are all of the announcements we have just made or are going to be making. So loads and loads of stuff in here that we can kind of dig through. So let's go see. First section, Azure AI. So there's a few bits and pieces in here. Number one, semantic search in Azure Cognitive Search. Now that's kind of like a big change in how things are doing searching. Previously, it's been very keyword based. So you type something and it goes, they use that word a lot. Let's bring out results that relate to that. Now it's actually treating it a lot more like a very advanced search engine and actually doing semantic models and looking for synonyms, correcting spelling, looking for similar ways of asking those questions, understanding kind of English questions to try and get there. Some really, really cool stuff in there. So if you're looking doing search, if you've been using cognitive search before, then definitely check that out. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. Form Recognizer, which I don't think gets anywhere near enough press as it is. So Form Recognizer is that kind of, I want to just show you an image, and that image is a scanned invoice or a picture of a driving license or various different almost OCR style scenarios. Someone's handwritten all of their medical details when they're submitting for, kind of a claim or applying to have a vaccine, whatever it happens to be. And this is kind of the we're going to scrape that. We're going to recognize that's a field and they've filled an answer in. Let's take that, make an attribute. And they've expanded it. So they're putting some better things on looking at different kind of IDs. They put in something like 64 languages. Yeah, 64 additional languages, which is a huge amount of translation ability that is now in there. So if you're looking at trying to essentially scan lots and lots and lots of form data, then that is an amazing tool that people don't talk about enough. Other bits and pieces. So machine learning has had a few upgrades in a few different areas. So some things in terms of role-based security, enabling it to actually be a little bit more in line with how other things work in Azure. There's big integrations with Azure Synapse Analytics. We've seen a few of those kind of machine learning inputs allowing you to call that out from your Spark pool, pull it out from other areas, push things using things like the ML Flow integration in Azure ML. So that kind of stuff is actually getting better and better and better and better, allowing you to go the other way. So if you're in Azure ML and you want to have a Spark back to notebook, you could previously do that with Databricks, so now allowing you to do it with your Synapse Analytics Spark pools as well. And kind of a funny thing, there's this Azure Percept, which again, news to me, I hadn't seen anything of. And that is all about doing your Azure ML kind of things, but on the edge. So how do you actually push these kind of little model scoring things, these little either pre-built in the form of cognitive services or built models in Azure ML? How do you push those out to your devices on the edge? How do you do it in sensors? How do you have something that's sitting there capturing information and scoring it in real time, but having the controls and the performance on those devices? So Azure Percept is all about that. So if that's an area you're interested in, go have a look at those updates and dig into it. Finally, support for Azure Arc in Azure Machine Learning. And that is, again, Arc is all about getting Azure and then being able to push Azure services, Azure like platform as a service services, but actually push those and manage them in your own space, in your own data center, in your own servers. So being able to kind of have Azure ML and run it in your own Kubernetes cluster on-prem is really, really cool. All about making sure Azure ML is kind of just creating models and you can use those models wherever rather than having it really locked tightly into that ecosystem. Okay, and then that's it. That's it for Azure AI. So there's a few bits and pieces and kind of some of those really important updates. But there isn't a crazy new craziness, except maybe Percept, which I hadn't seen. Okay, so in Azure Data, we've got a few things. So there's a few key tools coming out. So big one is this Azure Synapse Pathway. And that is, it's a very fancy name. And that's essentially a migration tool. It's allowing you to point this application, this kind of Azure Synapse Pathway tool at your existing data. And again, it mentions a few different things. It could be on a SQL Server, it could be in a Tezza, Snowflake, Teradata, BigQuery, lots of different places you can point this tool at and just say, how can I take that and lift and shift it into Synapse? So it's kind of like giving you that kind of, well, a code translator to change the code so it is now in syntax that is compatible. Give you kind of a rough idea of kind of essentially how complex it's going to be, any risk factors, any non-supported functionality, all of that kind of thing. So it's essentially like sort of, there was an old kind of database migration, like sort of assessment tool, which was used in SQL Server to move between different versions of it. And this kind of like the updated Synapse flavor with more different tools, more different sources, and more different direction. Now, the thing for me currently is that this will allow you to take your existing code and translate it into code that is friendly for dedicated SQL pools. Now, for me, that's a fairly naive one-way migration. Even going from like a big traditional MPP style warehouse and picking it up and putting it into another big traditional MPP style warehouse and kind of missing a trick. The whole point of Synapse is actually, so some of the things that you used to have to boilerplate and have big bits of code and actually save as physical tables, you can do dynamically in Spark and just actually say, I don't want to have 100 different stored procs that are basically doing the same thing on different tables. I want to have one Spark notebook that does it, and I just call that with different parameters. It's the whole point of doing that stuff. And this isn't pointing you down the way. It's not going to pull apart your code and recommend, actually, you should turn that into an automated thing. You should turn that into serverless queries. It's a kind of allowing you to get your code into Synapse and compatible with Synapse, but mainly from what I've seen on the dedicated SQL pool side. So cool stuff. And I'm sure they're growing it and working on it and doing some other stuff. But for now, it is mainly on that. I want to get it into Synapse in a dedicated SQL pool. Other bits, so Azure Stream Analytics now generally available. I was like, how long has it been in preview? So it's been updated, and you can now do single tenant clusters. So essentially, Stream Analytics is the platform as a service streaming tool, and it uses a little bit of something that looks a little bit SQL-like to do calculation on a stream, which is really, really cool. So you can just say, I want to stream from there to there, and apply this SQL query on it as it goes. And it's super easy, super flexible, really low management, quite a useful tool. And the where question going, what's it running on? Is it running on the same server as someone else? Is there technically some kind of data leakage potential? And as usual, not really a big risk, but a lot of people, for their security regulation, it has to be single dedicated tenant. So they've enabled that now. So you can say, I want to use Stream Analytics. I want to use all the out of the box, easy get started stuff, but I want to have it on my single tenant. I want to pay to have it running on my own box in isolation. So lots of interesting stuff there. If you're using Stream Analytics, you can take a look at that. If you're trying to do streaming in Azure, that is one option. Now, for us, we always kind of just play the weighing up game as to how complex those various streams you're trying to do are. Because you can do some fairly complicated things in Stream Analytics, but you nearly always, if you've got like lots of different transformations, different step changes of aggregations, you always end up doing one Stream Analytics job to move to another one. And then that joins onto another stream, which is the next stage, and then another stream. And you're kind of stitching things together to get that complexity. And most of the time, actually, these days, we just do it using Spark streaming. So I'd normally spin up a Databricks cluster and then use the streaming jobs in there, which uses the same syntax as the batch jobs. And I have a lot more, it feels like I've got a lot more power, feels like I've got a lot more options, and I've got a lot more kind of visibility of what's going on. It's less of a managed service. It's a lot more work. I have to actually code that out. It's less accessible than just writing a little snippet of SQL and popping that into the browser. And also, if I'm streaming in Spark, I have to have a cluster turned on. I need a minimum of like 3 machines, a driver, and 2 workers to have that working. Stream Analytics, I can get it working smaller and cheaper. So it kind of depends on how much data you're dealing with versus what the complexity, how many steps in the compute are there. So lots of things. That's not news. We're getting diverted. That's still interesting news about Stream Analytics with the GA announcement and the dedicated single host. Okay, let's go on to Pervy. So Pervy has a whole load of new things. So Pervy is still in preview. Now, I did have a few people asking me going, is Pervy going live in Ignite? Because they'd originally announced preview pricing, and the preview pricing ended end of February. And then lo and behold, a couple of days after the end of February, we had Microsoft Ignite. I had a few people go, does that mean it's GA? And I was like, I don't honestly know. No, Pervy is not GA. It looks like they've extended the preview pricing. I think that was until June. So again, it looks like we're going to be in preview with Pervy for for a few months, probably into the summer. Again, don't have any hard roadmaps. So there is a more detailed one for Pervy. So let's take a quick step into there and we can do a few things. So 1, we can now do AWS simple storage. So if you're using essentially blob storage, but in Amazon, you can now scan that with Pervy. And that seems to be a bit of a message in terms of some of the releases. Kind of, there are more and more sources being added. So they've added S3 as a destination. They've also added some of these things. They've added ERP like SAP HANA, SAP ECC, Oracle databases can now be scanned using Pervy. And the same thing of add it as a data source to your collection. It'll go in, suck it all up, and then have that as part of your data map. Again, very, very cool, extending the reach of it. For me, I'm sad because I just want them to do things like Hive and the other esoteric data types that you get in Azure. I prefer to be able to map everything in Azure before I think about bringing in other things. But there are lots of big use cases and big people who have a massive sprawling data estate that need to understand that kind of thing. So it needs to do it all eventually. Not the order I'd like, but it's fine. You can now use Pervy to scan Synapse workspace across serverless and dedicated SQL pools. So I've looked at dedicated SQL pools before. I've not checked out the serverless stuff, so that is really, really cool. You can do resource groups and subscriptions. That is a biggie. So there's a new multiple source you can do inside Pervy to say, just go and look at that resource group. Go and look at this as your subscription and scan everything you find. And that's a much more vast, sprawling thing. So rather than having to manually add every SQL server that you're going to have inside that particular subscription, you can say, go see what you can find. Obviously, that is a vast, sprawling search. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how well it works, what kind of costs are associated, how long it takes to go and do that full scan of everything. If I've got a mature enterprise workspace with a whole ton of stuff, I'll see. Okay, Azure powered search in Synapse workspaces. We did a video on that a week or so ago, which is looking at now you can connect your Pervy account to Synapse. So when you're inside the Synapse workspace and you can do a search in the toolbar to say, where's a data set that mentions that? It can use Pervy to tell you where those data sets are, even if that's not linked, even if your the data source is not a linked service in Synapse yet. It can check the catalog and go, oh, that's a data source you're not using. You should go for it over there, which is really, really cool. Again, the more we see Pervy plugged in to our different data ecosystems, the better it becomes, the more useful it is as a data discovery tool. They've improved business glossary catalog, so I want to take a look at this. So previously it was like you could add one or you could add a couple of different glossaries all at the same level. By having glossary items, just going, this belongs to 5 different things, isn't that useful? With being able to have a hierarchy and actually say we've got essentially kind of a whole lexicon of stuff, and this breaks down into these, which breaks down into these, and actually be able to kind of organize and curate a business glossary that has that kind of more advanced relationship and essentially, as they say, better represents real life business vocabulary. So definitely all the improvements we see for the business glossary and Pervy are going to be great. And it now supports private endpoint, which is a big, big thing. If you've got a secure Azure estate, if you've actually linked everything up into a VNet and you're blocking outside access and you've got private endpoints working for everything, then Pervy couldn't scan it, which just makes no sense. If you're an organization concerned about security and concerned about tying down all of your resources and managing it in a very enterprise security manner, you're going to be the people who want to have Pervy doing that scanning, doing that data governance. The fact that we couldn't do it before, slightly mad. Definitely great that we're enabling that support. So Pervy, lots of different things, lots of things moving on, lots of new releases. Again, kind of just keeping the cadence in improving that. The final part of data, I think, 2 parts of data. So some updates with Azure Cache or Redis. So if you're using Redis Cache, if you're using kind of that as a serving layer to take a lot of data and then put that behind a very, very, very quick cached lookup for things like websites, if you're trying to do very quick serving of data. Again, slightly on the edges of what we think of as the data platform, the data ecosystem. But yes, there's lots of improvements in there. I'd recommend just taking a look. I've not got through it in detail. And finally, Cosmos DB. So Synapse link for Cosmos DB is now generally available. So you can now actually have that HTAP, that hybrid transactional analytical processing. You can now say, hey, Cosmos DB, I want you to automatically sync any changes I make down into an analytical store. So when I'm in Synapse, I can query that and it's going to be fast and it can be built for analytics. So if you're trying to do real-time reporting on top of Cosmos DB and you're finding it going slow, you've now got this tool for free. Not for free. It's definitely not free. You've now got this tool now generally available to go and query from the Synapse workspace. You can go and work through that. Other elements in Cosmos, Mongo 4. So I know a lot of people who are currently working on Mongo, you want these managed tools to be using the latest and greatest version. So definitely good that they're upgrading that. Again, don't use it heavily myself. It's definitely good to see. And then some improvements in terms of continuous backup, point-in-time recovery of Cosmos DB, which is great. That's currently available in preview. And then you've got some role-based access control elements, which again, if everything is actually using role-based access control properly, then we have a single plane of security and it just becomes a lot better. oh God, forgot one more. And there is now managed instance for Cassandra as a new tool, essentially in Azure. So if you're currently using Cassandra and you're not a fan of the Cosmos DB side of things, this is another version, another place in Azure to actually migrate your Cassandra workloads. Now, honestly, this came as a bit of a surprise to me because I don't know many companies that are using the Cassandra style of Cosmos DB. So the fact that there's now another way of doing it, But then obviously I'm fairly biased. I'm in big data land of using lots and lots of Spark things. And if you're talking to people who are very Spark and data lakey and all of that kind of stuff, they're probably not a Cassandra house. So might just be the people I talk to aren't doing a lot with it. But it is a new tool. It does have lots of options in there. And it is now available to go and have a look in preview again. So it's another new tool we can go and investigate. We can have a bit of a look at. Okay, so lots of the tools around. So normal Ignite, there's lots of things around dev, data centers. I'm not going to walk into that. Hybrid, blah, 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 blah. I think the next thing I wanted to quickly mention, there's only one thing I really want to pull out. And that is the fact that we now have, let's see, the word automate is going to be everywhere, isn't it? So Power Automate, which is essentially the, it used to be called Microsoft Flow. I prefer Microsoft Flow. There we go. So in the Power Platform, we've now got this element. So Microsoft Power Automate is this web-based GUI of kind of doing a, if this trigger happens, do this, then do that, and then put it over there. Like the Power Platform version of Logic Apps I always thought about it as. And there's now a desktop version of it, which is crazy cool. So that is a free tool. You can just download it in Windows 10 and say, I would like to make a new automated workflow. When this happens on my local machine, do this, this, and this. And you can start to automate tasks out. Again, it's definitely not a thing to do with, data platform and all the things I care about. But it's just a really cool little tool. Really cool to have the ability to send data between places. When at this point in time, if I get an email, extract some data and put it into a zip file and send it to someone, that kind of just life automation is very, very, very cool. So definitely recommend taking a look at that, especially because it is free. So why wouldn't you download it and have a play with that? If you're currently building lots and lots of PowerShell and triggers and you're doing all that kind of dev side of things, this is the low to no code version of that. So some really cool things in there and loads of other stuff. We now have per user pricing for Power BI Premium. So they announced that they're doing Power BI Premium per user. So if you don't have enough Power BI usage to pay for a Power BI Premium capacity, which is somewhere in the region of £3,000-4,000 a month, if you don't have enough people using Power BI to actually go for that, then actually just saying, hey, I want to have a handful of users working with that, getting the pricing, and then getting all that ability to work with it is really, really, really cool. And actually, from what it looks like, it's fairly cheap. Again, don't know the figures off the top of my head. I think it was somewhere in the region of $10 to $20 extra on a pro license, which in the grand scheme of things is crazy cheap compared to actually, the cost of adopting Power BI Premium and starting to get some of those functionalities. So there's anything in there that you've always looked at and gone, oh, I'd love to use that in Power BI, but I can't because we're not big enough to have a Power BI Premium. We don't use it enough, or we have too distributed usage to make sense for Power BI Premium. You can now go and use those features on a per user basis. So definitely take a look at that if that is what you're interested in. Cool. They are all the updates I wanted to go through. Again, a whole ton of stuff. That's why they've got a whole couple of day conference about it. But I would definitely recommend going and taking a look at the book of news, pulling apart those ones. Each of those items does have a little, would you like to know more? Here's the actual blog post, the actual announcements, and all the detail behind it. So obviously, take anything I've said with a pinch of salt and go and read the docs, have a look at the things that you're interested in. And yes, let us know down in the comments what you think of these announcements, anything you thought was going to be there that isn't. What are you most excited about? Of those things, have I pulled on the right ones? Is there something I've missed? Is there like a little announcement in there I could have glossed over and go, no, that's fine. And you're like, no, that means a lot. This means we can do. Let us know down in the comments. It'd be really good to get your opinions on things. Otherwise, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll leave you guys with the link and you can go and read the book of news and enjoy the rest of Ignite. Cheers.